Today, I'm going to be discussing two different intervention approaches utilized with children who stutter. Specifically, I wanted to ask the question, do preschool children who stutter benefit more from the LITCOM program of intervention to reduce moments of disfluencies or from the demands and capacity model? So for the sake of the presentation, I'll refer to it as the DCM model. Most children who stutter typically do so around 2.5 years of age. SLPs play a vital role in the early management of these children. For preschool age kids, clinicians apply both direct and indirect behavioral treatments that focus on teaching the child ways to modify speech patterns and or working with caregivers to facilitate fluent speech. Joe Sheehan made a statement in his book which stated, "Stuttering is like an iceberg, with only a small part above the waterline and a much bigger part below. The tip representing the physical act of stuttering, but the emotional baggage is what lies beneath the surface. As future SLPs, it is important to treat our fluency patients as a whole by addressing their feelings and attitude in addition to their disfluencies." There's been controversy in our field whether to employ a direct treatment approach where the child's speech fluency is modified or an indirect approach where factors contributing to the fluency are modified. Let's dive into the research to see what others have to say about the best evidence-based intervention for preschool children who stutter. I thoroughly searched the web to collect evidence-based research comparing the LITCOM program to the DCM model. I used databases such as the ASHA Practice Portal, EBSCOhost from the LSU Library, ERIC, and ResearchGate. The search terms I used to narrow down my results were preschool, stuttering, intervention, LITCOM, and demands and capacity model. The LITCOM program is a direct treatment approach for early stuttering involving parent participation for stutter-free speech. During weekly clinical visits, SLPs teach parents to give verbal contingencies in conversations with their child. Parents should primarily comment on the child's fluent speech and only occasionally on their disfluencies. For example, the parent might say, "That was great smooth talking." The program is divided into 2 phases. During phase 1, there are weekly clinical visits, and parents are instructed to deliver verbal contingencies for just about 10 to 15 minutes a day. This continues until the stuttered speech significantly decreases. During phase 2, the number of clinical visits and use of verbal contingencies were gradually reduced to promote generalization and maintenance. On the contrary, the demands and capacity model is an indirect approach premised on the idea that positive changes in the child's environment will lead to a reduction of stuttering. The goal is to decrease the demands set by the environment in order to increase the child's capacity for dealing with them, thus arriving at a favorable balance between demands and capacity that results in fluent speech. So how exactly is this done? We can decrease environmental demands by training caregivers to adjust their interaction style with their child. For example, the caregivers might slow down their rate of speech, use simple vocabulary, and avoid criticizing disfluent speech. So now that we know the difference between the 2 interventions, which one is best practice? Nee and colleagues conducted a systematic review on interventions for children who stutter. 8 electronic databases were utilized for the search, and a total of 9 studies met the inclusion criteria. The randomized control study I analyzed within the article specifically compared the LITCOM program to the DCM for children under the age of 6 years old. Analysis of the 2 approaches yielded no statistically significant differences for stuttered syllables or for stuttered words. The magnitude of the effect of one treatment is no greater than the effect of the other treatment. And this inconclusive finding was a very common theme throughout my search of the literature. I found another large-scale systematic review that compared the effectiveness of direct versus indirect treatment for preschool children who stutter. And lucky for me, the 2 interventions they compared were DCM and LITCOM program. Unfortunately, after considering inclusion and exclusion criteria, all 62 of the abstracts reviewed were excluded from the study. That was great. Right? Currently, there is insufficient evidence to support or refute the use of a direct treatment approach over an indirect treatment approach for preschool-age children with fluency disorder. Although there is considerably more evidence in favor of the LITCOM program, a direct approach, there is still significant evidence to suggest success for children treated with the DCM model, an indirect approach. In 2015, a study was conducted in the Netherlands with 199 preschool children who stutter. Half of the children received the LITCOM program for intervention and the other half the DCM DCM approach. After 18 months of intervention, the evidence suggests that both approaches for stuttering can be recommended in a clinical setting. Not very helpful. By now, we have looked at many different articles with one consistent finding. One approach is no better than the other. So the question still stands. Which do we implement in a clinical setting? I decided to dig deeper in the literature to get a better understanding of the two approaches individually to draw my own conclusion. A study by Arnett and colleagues solidified the effectiveness of the LIDCOM program administered in both individual and in a group setting. Group delivery of the LIDCOM program is proven to be an effective alternative to the individual model, and parents responded very favorably to the group intervention style. After analyzing the research, it is my conclusion that the LIDCOM program is an effective and perhaps favorable form of intervention for preschoolers. Whether it's administered in a group or an individual setting, this program has significantly decreased stuttered speech for disfluent children under the age of 6 years old. The final article I came across suggested a need for further replication of the DCM model. Because both LIDCOM program and DCM are evidence-based, it is now up to us, the clinicians, to use our clinical judgment to decide which to implement in a clinical setting. Stuttering is dynamic, and the population that falls within this domain is vastly different. Taking the time to build rapport with the family and meeting the child where they're at will aid in this decision-making process. To conclude, I would like to see future research investigating the validity of a combined direct and indirect approach. This may shed further light on the effectiveness of stuttering treatment in preschool children. I think implementing both strategies with our kiddos who stutter may have profound effects on their fluency journey. And I hope you all learned something from this presentation. If you have a preschooler who stutters in the future, odds are you'll implement either one or both of these approaches. Yay. Any questions?